welcome to today's episode of the Balanced Approach podcast. I'm your host, Louis Padian. I hope that you're doing well and are enjoying the podcast and the topics we've covered so far. These podcasts are released every Monday, Wednesday and Friday, so be sure to subscribe wherever you are listening to be kept up to date. So today we'll be covering why waiting for the right headspace is a quick road to nowhere and it's essentially a waste of time. So you rarely get into a task through just waiting and it's sporadically happening. You often get into it by taking action. So doing the thing often means that you're more likely to do more of it. Therefore, taking action actually leads to you getting in the right headspace, getting in the zone is what we'd say. But that's rather easily said and quite hard to do. So we're going to talk about 5 different ways that you can put into practice from today and will help you start taking action a bit more and stop waiting to get into the right headspace. So the first one would be setting small and achievable goals. We've discussed at length in this podcast, episode 11, which is how to set smarter goals, and episode 28, which was 3 reasons why people fail and 3 ways to overcome them. All about how to set pretty much unbeatable goals and making sure that we focus on setting an achievable process and outcome goals with that as well. How we've got avoidance and approach goals in there, and they're all so important. So I'd highly suggest if you're trying to set goals and you feel like this is the problem, then actually going back and listening to episode 11 after this episode could be a great place in helping you understand all different parts. It can really help you set amazing goals, but setting smaller, more achievable goals. And the way that I describe this is that it has to pass the Goldilocks test, too small or too easy, and it doesn't drive you to take action. If it's too large and it's too far away, then potentially you'll just delay taking action because you've got plenty of time to make up. So it's just got to be the right size for you in regards to how hard it's going to be, how long you're going to take to achieve it, and the process as well that takes you there. And again, just looking at the smarter goal setting and the GROW model that we use, outlined in episode 11, can be a great way to go about that. So this first one is setting small and achievable goals. The second one, which is often a really big game changer for a lot of people, is breaking down larger tasks or larger goals into smaller steps. So if we take the example of losing 20 pounds, worrying about losing 20 pounds is 20 times harder and more daunting than losing £1 20 times. So the process is the same, but changing mindset there and remembering there's no point worrying about where you're going to be in £5 time, £7 time, £10, £20 time, because you've got to lose that first one in the first place anyway. And I definitely think having sort of a visual tick sheet, which is easy to sort of monitor and tick this off, can be a really good way to sort of break it down into more manageable bites. So if you check out the link in this episode or the link in my bio on my social media, on my Instagram, you can download one of my free weight loss trackers there that I'll upload after this episode. But back to making it more manageable. A great phrase that I love and I've quoted a lot with clients potentially, and is, how do you think that you can run a marathon? And it's actually just one step at a time. And that's what we've got to do. We've got to break it down to smaller and smaller steps. With clients, this could be breaking it down. And one of the clients that I worked with within the NHS, getting into the habit of walking. The first thing we actually focused on was just getting in the habit of putting your shoes on, because he saw it as a big task of going up and around the block. And he was like, I can't be bothered. And I was like, right, how about we just set the goal of putting your shoes on? And if you put your shoes on, you don't fancy it, then you know what, job done. We've tried. But once you've got your shoes on, then you're probably more inclined to put your coat on, start getting ready. Then you're more inclined to get out the door, and then you're more inclined towards the end of the path. And these are all the steps that we were breaking it down into. And this is how he found it a lot easier, because we just set really small, achievable goals for him. With other things, we sort of set a thing called the 2-minute rule. And you might laugh at this, but I use it with clients going to the gym, people trying to go for walks, journaling, and it's about having a specific, almost laughable, achievable goal. If you told someone to go to the gym, we're only going to go for 2 minutes, they'd be like, well, what's the point? Actually, the hardest part is getting there. So actually us going, right, 2 minutes, get on the treadmill, get on the bike, do your bit of a warm up. If you don't fancy it, you can go home, you've tried. And same with journaling, is actually having that scheduled committed block of 2 minutes and going, right, so you're going to sit down for 2 minutes, set a timer. There's no pressure, and some of the other things we'll discuss will slot right in here, and sort of how we can make it a lot easier to things like journaling. But it's about having a small goal that is almost too easy to achieve. If you want to get better at press ups, then going, right, so I'm just going to do 1 press up a day. Do 1, you might, well, actually, maybe I might get 3 or 4 out. well, you've already surpassed your goal there. But if we set the minimum standard of one press a day, then you're more likely to achieve it by going forward, because it's easy just to do one potentially for a lot of people. So building that up over time, that consistency, turning up is often the hardest thing, is a really good way. And often that is just breaking it down to the smallest first step, really. So third was creating a routine and sticking to it. There's a great phrase that I love, which is routines and rituals get results, because habitual actions and behaviors move us closer to where we want to be without even realizing. And that's the beauty of them, is that often we're on autopilot, but they have to become routines and rituals first. So building that routine is really important. Now, there's a few quotes I got here from one of my favorite books. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend it, around behavior change. It's by James Clear, and it's called Atomic Habits. It says the most practical way to change who is to change what you do on a regular basis. And this is what we would often call identity-based behaviors, where it's not just what you do, but it's who you are. And you might see this with people who, they don't eat a vegan diet, they are vegan, or they don't train in a functional fitness gym or do CrossFit, they are a CrossFitter. I was a rugby player, and that can be really powerful. Can also have lots of drawbacks, which we'll probably discuss in another episode. But having these habits and behaviors can be really powerful if we just phrase them as part of our identity. So if you want to stop just waiting for the right headspace, you could just simply commit to being somebody who takes action regardless of what headspace they're in, and having that and building that. And it's almost like a muscle. The more that we do it, the more that we flex it, the stronger it gets. Then just building that habit and that routine around, right, just doing the thing, that can be a really powerful way to do it. And one key thing around routines is finding a routine that works for you, not against you. Making it as easy as possible to make the best decision, but also making it as hard as possible to make the wrong decision. And I'll probably discuss this around habits. I think I've got a whole load of episodes I want to record around habits, and what I'd call is adding friction and lube. Where can we add friction to habits that we don't want to do, and where can we add lube to make habits that we do want to do a bit easier? And there's lots of different things that we can do around that. So number 3 was creating a routine and sticking to it. Next up is rewarding yourself for the process. And this can be a bit of a tricky one, because one of the things around nutrition that I've worked on a lot over the years is how often food plays a key part of rewarding, when actually there's lots of other things that we can do that can align with our values and goals. If we want to reinforce behavior, we need to reward it. You've probably seen this if you've had pets and animals. If you want them to do certain behaviors, you tend to give them treats when they've done them to reinforce that behavior, or to build that link between a command and a response is rewarding at it. So when you say that command, they're more likely to do the response that you want. It doesn't have to be a huge thing, and often it can be really small, but it's important that it's sort of immediate and consistent. And again, some sort of quotes that I've got from that amazing book is the key to making a habit stick is to make it satisfying. When you do a habit, you should feel rewarded. And that's what we want to build, especially with habits that potentially we don't feel an immediate drive to do. It's having that rewarding factor in there. So if it's going to the gym, it could be, and this is one that I've used with clients a lot, is if they are at a nice gym, for example, and they find it difficult, and it might be a more expensive membership where there's a spa or a pool or things like that, then we go, right, we're going to do 10-15 minutes in the gym. If you want to do more, fantastic. Once we've done that, we'll go to the pool, and that's a little tick box there. Or it might be that we're going to treat ourselves to something at the weekend, maybe some new clothes or something like that. And a good way to do this would be to pair the new habit with something, or the thing that you're trying to do is something that you already enjoy. So it could be a task such as tidying the house, and you feel like you have to be in the right headspace to tidy the house or tidy the room. If you want to break it down to a smaller goal, we're going to start with a small corner and we're going to tidy here. Then, you know what, I'm going to put my favourite podcast on, because I know I enjoy that podcast. I'm going to put my favourite playlist on and listen to that whilst I do it, to make it that bit more enjoyable. And the key bit is around that immediacy. We don't want to delay that reward, because then we don't associate that feel-good factor with the thing that we've done. So making sure that you are linking it as close as possible is really important. So things that are common would be taking yourself out for a walk somewhere that you enjoy walking, potentially, if that's what you want to do. Maybe a cup of coffee on the way home from the gym, if that's what you fancy, or a cup of tea. Or for completing the task or whatever, it's about, you might want to have a face mask or a spa treatment or something like that. There's an endless list of things that you could do to reward yourself, but it's making sure that it's specific to you, your values and your goals, and is in line with what you're trying to achieve. There's no point if you're trying to build a habit of going to the gym or manage your weight, that we're going, right, so if I go to the gym for 10 minutes, then my reward is to sit in front of the TV for a couple of hours afterwards, because we're almost negating what we're trying to do. We're trying to become more active potentially. And same with if I lose a pound this week, if we're losing the weight loss, which again is a sort of a murky area, but if this is just for an example, a bad example might be, well, I'll have a big meal on Friday night and have a pizza, or have a big weekend where I eat everything that I want. And that might not align with what we're trying to achieve long term. So again, like I said, there's so much in habits, and a lot of the things that I do around building habits and making them easier. And what I work on with clients is trying to make things that potentially are more difficult to do easier to do, more habitual and more enjoyable a lot of the time, and finding interesting ways to do that. So again, I'm sure I'll do a lot more deep dives on this topic. So rewarding yourself for the process for number 4. Number 5 is not being afraid to make mistakes. And this is a really important one. And I think progress is a messy sort of process, and is rarely linear. And I think that's really important to remember, is that you're not going to get it right from the get-go. You rarely get it right from the get-go. And there's going to be lots of learning curves. You can do things wrong, and that's okay, because that's part of the learning curve. And it's important that we learn these things when we start, because they help us learn from them. And it's important to learn these lessons earlier on before we start to master a habit. And it's important as part of this that often I find people is that they beat themselves up for not getting things right or not being good at something. So for me, for example, at the moment, during lockdown, I started getting into running, and okay, I'm never a great runner. As a professional rugby player, I was never very fond of running for running's sake, but I've really got into it. However, earlier this year, I had some really bad issues with a recurring back injury. This the worst I'd had it ever, and basically put me off my feet for a couple of months. Really bad place mentally, physically, regressed a lot, wasn't training, found it really difficult to move, and a lot of pain day to day. Since it's been away, it's been getting a lot better. Spent more time doing a lot more recovery, mobility, stretching, but also just different style of life where I'm not sitting down as much. However, the point of this is that I've started to get back into running. I've really missed running. We started training for a 10k in Halong Bay in probably 5 weeks time. But the first couple of training sessions compared to where I was previously weren't great, really difficult. But part of that was accepting, like, this is where I am now. I'm not where I was when I was running just over a 25-minute 5k, not when I was training for a half marathon during lockdown. And actually meeting yourself where you're at is a really important part of the process, but understanding that actually it's just getting stuck in and trying my best and listening to my body, that I can just do the best that I can in the situation they're in with the tools that I have available, and embracing that I'm not expecting myself to be the finished article. This 10k time going for a couple of weeks isn't really a big focus for me. Actually just getting through the training plan pain-free is a big part of it. So when I speak to clients around starting something new or getting into something, it's often just about imperfect action, just taking action any way that you can. And if it's something that you have expectations around, another thing could be childlike curiosity. So for example, working with my clients, if they're getting into journaling, would be that 2-minute rule and just going, right, just explore. There's no expectations. If you write one word during it, fantastic. If you don't write anything, fantastic. You dedicated the time. But exploring it, taking the pressure off. And that's a big part of new habits, new tasks, or things that you're struggling to get into, is just going, right, I'm just going to jump in feet first and see where I end up, embrace it, embrace the messiness, see what I can do. And then once you're in it, then you can start to fine tune it. Once you're in that headspace from taking action, then we can talk about fine tuning. So that's a big part of it as well, is not being afraid to make mistakes. So there we have it. We have the 5 ways to get out of your own way and to stop waiting to get in the right headspace, which are setting small and achievable goals, breaking them down into smaller, manageable chunks, creating a routine, rewarding yourself in whatever way that you feel is appropriate that aligns with your values and goals, and not being afraid of making mistakes. And I thought it'd be a nice place to leave you on the end of this episode with an amazing quote by Alex Hormozy. And I think it really rings true with a lot of things when we're starting something new and waiting to get in the right headspace. But you can get good enough at almost anything in 20 hours of focused effort. Problem is, most people spend years delaying the first hour. The trick is to stop delaying the first step. So there you have it. Thank you very much for listening to today's episode of the Balanced Approach podcast. If you have any questions, queries, or would like to reach out to me, please do. I am at Louis Padian Nutrition, which is at LOUIS Padian Nutrition on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and all other social media platforms. If you're looking for support in achieving your goals and living a healthier, happier, and more balanced life in the process, click the link below and inquire about working with me. Remember to subscribe to the Balanced Approach podcast wherever you're listening for more insightful episodes, and I look forward to speaking to you soon.